right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating concept, how to take that sudden, sharp sting of rejection and actually transform it into a powerful, active process for building resilience. Hearing the word no is something literally every single one of us faces, right? But this idea we're looking at today, it completely flips the script on how we process failure. Instead of treating rejection like a massive brick wall that just stops us dead in our tracks, this framework is basically a masterclass on turning a no into a stepping stone. So, if you've ever, say, hesitated to ask for a raise, a favor, or a big opportunity just because you were terrified of the answer, well, you're in exactly the right place.
I want you to take a quick second and deeply reflect on your immediate internal reaction the last time someone told you no. Seriously, put yourself right back in that exact moment. What actually happened physically? Did your stomach completely drop? Did your chest tighten up? And maybe more importantly, what happened mentally? Look, for most of us, the default human response to rejection is just to retreat. We instantly internalize it as a personal failure, right? A signal that we just aren't good enough, or maybe a sign we should just throw in the towel. It's a visceral, deeply uncomfortable experience, for sure. But what if that completely natural reaction is entirely the wrong way to look at it? What if that awful feeling isn't a red light telling you to stop, but rather a very specific, highly useful type of data?
Okay, so here's the specific framework we're going to use as our roadmap for this explainer. It goes like this. Practice response to rejection. Manage your internal language and keep it positive when faced with rejection, such as praising yourself for stretching your asking muscles and thinking of the next opportunity. Now, on the surface, I know that might sound like your standard run-of-the-mill self-help advice, but stick with me here. When you really break down the verbs being used, practice, manage, praise, stretch, think, you start to realize this is actually a highly strategic, incredibly active framework for completely rewiring your brain.
Let's start with the very first instruction we're given here, which is to literally practice your response to being rejected. I want you to really think about that word for a second, practice. You don't practice things that are just rare, freak anomalies, right? You practice things that you know are absolutely 100% going to happen. Athletes run plays over and over because they know game day is coming. Musicians practice their scales because the concert is already on the calendar. By telling us to practice our response, this idea is fundamentally shifting the whole nature of rejection. It goes from being this scary surprise attack to a known, totally predictable variable. And because rejection is just an inevitable event, it absolutely demands a deliberate response. Listen, if you are pushing boundaries in any way, you are going to hear no. Whether you're pitching some wild new idea in a stuffy board meeting, asking for startup funding, or hey, even just asking someone out on a date, you really cannot leave your reaction up to chance. You definitely can't leave it up to your primal emotional brain in the heat of the moment. It has to be an active practice. You have to literally rehearse how you're going to feel and exactly what you'll say to yourself when that door inevitably gets shut. That simple shift, it moves you from being a passive victim of circumstance to an active participant in your own growth.
Which brings us to the next really vital piece of the puzzle, managing your internal language. Let's just hover on that word manage for a moment. Managing implies oversight. It implies authority. We all know that when you get rejected, there's usually this incredibly loud, highly critical voice that instantly pops up in your head. It's the one saying, "Ugh, I'm such an idiot for asking," or "They probably think I'm a total joke." Well, this framework acknowledges that that voice exists, but it insists that you must become the manager of that voice. You cannot let your internal language just run wild. You've got to step in, grab the wheel, and actively direct the conversation that's happening inside your own mind.
And this brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast between letting an unsaid negative default reaction take over versus actively stepping in to control the narrative. On one side, you've got the sting of rejection managing you. That's the scenario where a single no literally ruins your entire Tuesday and makes you want to hide under your desk, just bitter and totally unwilling to ever ask again. But on the flip side, you actively manage the language to keep it positive. You're basically overriding your brain's default operating system. You consciously choose to tell yourself a different, better story about what just went down. You aren't ignoring the rejection, but you are completely changing the vocabulary you use to describe it to yourself.
Now we reach the physical metaphor of the text, where we are instructed to praise ourselves for stretching your asking muscles. Honestly, this is my absolute favorite part of the entire concept. It introduces this amazing idea of an asking muscle. Think about how any muscle actually grows in the gym. It only grows through resistance, right? It only gets stronger when it's pushed past its current capacity, creating those tiny micro tears that eventually heal back stronger. So, this tells us that the simple act of asking for something, especially when there is a massive risk of rejection, is the exact mechanism you need for building this muscle. The asking literally is the workout. What's truly fascinating here is how this completely reframes a no. It takes it from being this demoralizing failure and turns it into a totally successful repetition in your resilience workout. Just let that sink in for a second. If your goal is to build your asking muscles, a yes is great, obviously, we love a yes, but a no means you actually found your limit. You lifted the heavy weight, you stretched the muscle. By instructing us to consciously praise ourselves for this stretch, we are completely decoupling the outcome, the yes or the no, from the action itself. The true victory isn't in getting the yes. The victory is in having the absolute courage to flex the muscle and make the ask in the first place.
So let's see how all these pieces build into a highly actionable recovery sequence. This takes you from the immediate painful moment of a no straight through to an empowered recovery. Step 1, the rejection hits, and boom, you immediately manage your internal language. You shut down that inner critic cold. Step 2, you pivot straight to positive reinforcement. By praising yourself for the stretch, you literally tell yourself, hey, good job for making the ask. That took guts. And then, immediately, you move to step 3, thinking of the next opportunity. Basically, this entire 3-step sequence acts as a massive shock absorber for your ego. That final step brings us right to the horizon, focusing on the directive to immediately start thinking of the next opportunity. Now, this is an absolutely crucial pivot point. When we face rejection, our natural human tendency is to look backward. We ruminate, we obsess over what went wrong, what we could have said differently, or just how incredibly embarrassing that no felt. But this framework, it firmly points our gaze forward. By actively forcing your brain to search for the very next opportunity, you literally do not give yourself the mental bandwidth to sit around wallowing in the past.
By isolating this final phrase, we see that this pivot is actually a strict mechanism for maintaining momentum. It completely prevents you from dwelling on the rejection. Think about it. If rejection is just a workout for your asking muscles, then the natural next question for any athlete is simply, okay, when is my next workout? This turns the entire experience of being told no from a depressing dead-end street into, well, kind of a roundabout. You just circle right through the rejection, you manage that internal language, you praise the muscle stretch, and then you immediately take the exit headed straight toward the next pitch, the next request, the next bold move.
So I'll leave you with this final thought to carry with you. Where can you apply this mindset today and put your newly trained asking muscles to the absolute test? The single sentence we've unpacked in this explainer is incredibly brief, but as we've seen, it holds a massively powerful blueprint for building resilience. It challenges every single one of us to stop hiding from no and start actively managing our response to it. So take a look at your calendar, look at your big goals. Where is there a no that you've been actively avoiding? Go find it. Flex that muscle. Manage that internal language. And just watch how quickly a terrifying rejection simply becomes a warm-up for your next great opportunity.